Organized crime still occurs today with loan sharking, illegal gambling, and much more, but it boomed most in the 1920s. But first, before I get to that, we have to talk about the reasons why organized crime exists in the first place. In 1826, Lyman Beecher delivered and published 6 sermons on intemperance, which is the excessive use of alcohol. This is the spark that ignited a lot of anti-alcohol events, such as, in 1840s, the Washingtonian Society of Reformed Drunkards, and in 1851, the first state to be voted dry, which was Maine, and much more. So that takes us to January 16th, 1919. The Volstead Act was passed, declaring the production, transport, and sale of alcohol illegal. Alcoholics grieved as the substance that was killing them, but also keeping them alive at the same time, had been removed from their lives entirely, or so they thought. Soon, a new era called Prohibition started in 1920. Although some thought it would greatly reduce the amount of cases for domestic violence and murder, it only created unintended consequences that was ultimately for the worse. The economy was much worse, as bars and restaurants' overall customer count decreased dramatically. Plus, any place that specialized in alcohol, such as liquor stores and breweries, were shut down. Workers lost their jobs and shop owners lost their shops. People who worked in factories' overall condition became poor because they would usually drink alcohol to refresh themselves for the day. It also hadn't helped that World War I ended just a year before. Just a year after Prohibition started, people decided to start bootlegging. This term became popularized because people would hide alcohol by putting flasks in their boot. Famous bootleggers such as Adolphus Busch, James Cannon Jr., and Harry Daugherty had spawned from this time, but the most well-known one would be Alphonse Capone, or as some people would call him, Al Capone, also known as Scarface. Al Capone was a famous bootlegger born in 1899. He had infamously loved violence, not just because he would kill anyone who had stood in his way, but he had quotes such as, "You can go a long way with a smile, you can also go a farther way with a smile and a gun," and "You can get much farther with a kind word and a gun than you can with a kind word alone." He was born in 1899 into an Italian family. At 14, Alphonse quit school by hitting a teacher, and instead got his education by working for gangster Johnny Torreo and his street gangs. At 1918, Al was working as a bouncer and a bartender at a restaurant named Bustanobi. When he was working, he made a rude remark about a woman and her brother was nearby. When he heard this, the brother slashed Al's face several times, earning him the name Scarface. At the beginning of Prohibition, Johnny Torreo's boss was against the idea of bootlegging, but Johnny was all for it. Either Al Capone or a man named Frankie Yale was rumored to assassinate Big Jim Colosimo, Johnny's boss. This let Torreo sit on top of the Chicago mob. After Torreo's retirement, Al Capone came in and took over in 1925. When Capone was in charge, he dealt with all of his rival gangs with violence and aggression, with his most famous case being the 1929 Valentine's Day massacre on the Bugs Moran gang. By 1929, Al Capone was probably the most famous gangster, but a man named Elliot Ness was there to stop him. He eventually captured Capone because of tax evasion. On October 17, 1931, Capone was sentenced to 11 years in prison, but he only spent 6 years because of his good behavior and deteriorating health. He spent the remainder of his years in his palace with his wife May, and died on January 25, 1947 at the age of 48. But that's just the life of Al Capone, and there are plenty other famous gangsters that are worthwhile to check out. Followed by the Great Depression, in 1933, the 21st Amendment repealing Prohibition is ratified. This hadn't stopped gang violence and bootlegging, but it greatly reduced it. Overall, Prohibition was definitely a huge mistake, but in the end, it was corrected.